Good afternoon and welcome to the Harvard Family Bible Study. Today we're going to look at a quick overview of our second book of the Old Testament, which is Exodus. And we're going to deal with some of the issues that we raised in the last video of looking at the dating and why some of that is important and the problems that can come about from doing that. So before we begin, let's just kind of give you a quick overview of the book of Exodus. Exodus tells the tale of Moses, a leader who convinces an Egyptian pharaoh to let the Israelite people go. It's one of the most powerful images in the Bible, and there is, as you probably know, there have been films made of that image of Moses standing there, "Let my people go." This idea of being freed and in fact of being taken through the Red Sea is one that repeats all the way through the Old Testament, and we even see references to it in the New Testament. The story of Moses begins when Moses is just a baby. Pharaoh is worried about the growth of the Israelite population and orders the firstborn to be killed. Not wanting to kill her own child, Moses' mother puts him in a reed basket and puts him into the river. Pharaoh's daughter, who's come down to bathe, finds him and adopts him as his own. Moses grows up as an Egyptian, and one day, while he's out walking, comes across the cruel treatments of the Egyptians of the Israelites, and he steps in to stop some of the violence and kills the Egyptian overseer. When he's concerned that he is discovered, he runs for his life and ends up tending animals for his father-in-law Zipporah. After many years, Moses is tending animals, and he sees a bush which is burning but not being consumed by the fire. Out of the bush he hears God's voice, and this is the point where God identifies himself as "I am that I am, Yahweh." He identifies himself as the God of Moses' ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, and Joseph. Yahweh tells Moses to go and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. Pharaoh, as you probably remember, is not a fan of this idea and needs a little bit of convincing. He needs so much convincing, in fact, that Moses needs to send, with Yahweh's power, 10 plagues. So the first is the Nile turns to blood. The land is then overrun by frogs. It's covered in maggots. It's covered in flies. All the livestock die. The people are covered in boils. Hail comes down at the wrong time of year. Plague of locusts, plague of darkness, and a plague of the firstborn, which is the first institution of Passover. So this plague of the death of the firstborn is quite a powerful image, and in it there's lots of rituals that Yahweh says that the people of Israel need to do. They need to get a lamb. They need to kill it and eat it, and they need to eat it with their shoes on and ready to leave. And they need to eat it hurriedly. And if you can't afford a lamb, you should gather together with another house that can. And you should take the blood of the lamb and daub your door frame, so that when the angel of death passes over Egypt, it will know that those are houses that it need not visit, because that's where the Israelites live. And so the Passover then becomes a symbol of God protecting his people, and becomes instituted as part of what it is to be a modern Jew, as part of what it is to be an ancient Israelite. Pharaoh at this point gives in and says, "All right, go." And the Israelites gather up all the gold they can carry, all the gems they can carry, and pretty much everything that they can get on their backs and leg it out of Egypt. Very quickly, Pharaoh realizes that basically he's about to lose the whole of his slave army, and decides to go after them. Now, the number that we get for those people leaving Egypt is 600,000. That's a lot of people. So they head out into the sea, to a place called the Red Sea, with the Pharaoh's army hot on their heels with chariots chasing them down. We'll come back to the chariots in a minute. The Israelites are stuck between this large body of water and the army, and Moses, in Yahweh's power, turns to the Red Sea and parts it so that the Israelites cross over on dry land, and as the Egyptian army heads in after them, the sides come crashing down. You've probably seen this done a lot of times in films of Moses standing there with his arms wide open. And the Egyptian army, of course, is decimated in this sort of returning of the water. That's not the end of the story. There's a whole bunch that then happens from there. From there, the Israelites journey through the desert, and it should have been a straightforward walk. Only the Israelite people don't listen, and so they end up wandering for 40 years. Remember that in biblical terms, as we spoke about before, 40 years basically means a long time. While they were in the desert, they received the 10 commandments from Yahweh. They actually received them twice. The first time, as Moses comes down the hill, he discovers that the people have turned all their portable golden gems into this great big golden bull. He's so annoyed by this that he smashes the tablets on the ground. He deals harshly with the perpetrators and then goes back up the mountain to get another copy. Exodus is also the first time that we see some of the laws that found Israel as they sort of come into being, often with these kind of moralistic stories around them, and the laws come about as being a result of them, or strengthening the laws that we tend to think of as being already in place. For example, the rest on the Sabbath day. In order for the people not to starve in the desert, God sends manna from heaven, and this is a form of mushroom that seems to sort of produce a bread-like substance, and also that quails will arrive for them to eat, so they eat this kind of bread and quail diet. And on the Saturday, double amount will keep, so that you don't have to go out Sunday. If you gather more than what you need, that stuff will rot and go off. So you have to only gather what you need, thereby kind of supporting the idea of not taking more than is your fair share, and strengthening the idea of the Sabbath. So you've kind of got a lot of that. You've also got a whole bunch of other little rules that are put in there. Moses doesn't get to see the promised land. He walks with them all the way to the end of the promised land, and he unfortunately dies because he has transgressed from God. His eyes get to see the promised land, but he does not get to enter into it. There's so much in Exodus that it should very easily be a thing that we can date. We have a Pharaoh of Egypt, and thanks to the work of scholars, predominantly on the work of a scholar known as Manetheo, who is mostly right, we know quite a bit about the pharaohs of Egypt. We know their regnal years, so we know when they ruled, and we can work backwards through most of the pharaohs to kind of line up our pharaohs of Egypt with what we would now use as to be a current year dating. So if we had a name of a pharaoh, even if it was transliterated into Hebrew, we would be able to date it. Exodus, however, refers to the pharaoh simply as Pharaoh all the way through. Now, that kind of speaks both to the power of the pharaoh, that they are, you've got to remember, in Egypt, pharaohs are basically god kings. But it does seem a little odd that we don't have a name of the pharaoh. So without the name of the pharaoh, it doesn't help us date where this book would fall. The next, we have that wonderfully large number, 600,000 men, as well as women and children. So it's not just 600,000 people full stop, it's 600,000 men and their wives and their children. So even so that's a lot of people. So to give you an idea, you can fit 90,000 people into Wembley Stadium. So we're talking about the number of people that can fill 6 Wembley stadiums. And if you just assume half again of women and children, we're up to a full 9 Wembley stadiums worth of people. That's a lot of people. That many people walking around is likely to cause comment. That's a massive army. It's going to even create concerns in neighbouring countries, worried that this is a full-on invasion force. Exodus itself even notes that not all the countries are willing to let the Israelites walk through them because they are afraid of the size of the Israelites. So what does this help us with dating? We've got no contemporary datings of these events, so we don't have anything that we can anchor it into history, except for 2 names of a city. In Exodus 1:11, it says that the Israelite slaves helped to build Pithom and Ramses. All right, let's just pause there and have a look a bit about what it says about history. So, slaves were not directly used to build buildings in ancient Egypt because these buildings were complicated, especially if they were building them for a pharaoh. They would have to have been very well-trained craftsmen. And it's also not like building in the modern day where you could build a city in maybe 10 or 15 years. A lot of these projects, like the pyramids, were done by generations of people. Pyramids, for example, were started the moment the pharaoh was put on the throne, looking forward to their death. I don't mean looking forward in a pleasant way, but preparing for their death. So a lot of these cities could take a very long time. This was craftsmanship that was passed down from father to son, from father to son, from father to son. We've even got evidence of little townships being built just for the craftsmen to live in. Very nice townships built so that they could be close to where they're building. So slave here tells us one of 2 things. Either that the writer didn't really understand the harsh working conditions which wouldn't have made them slaves, or that the people who here helped build Pithom and Ramses were actually the real low order of slaves, in that they were just left to carry water and ropes to put these cities together, because they did use slaves in that way, rather like beasts of burden. We don't know. But let's just go back to Pithom and Ramses. Pithom is perhaps the most complicated to date. What we can say is obviously the text in Exodus can't have been written before Pithom and Ramses were in existence. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to use the names. So that already kind of gives us a line in the sand. So if we can find either Pithom and Ramses, we've got our line. Pithom is complicated. It seems to mean per Artem, a temple to Artem, and it seems to have been moved. Now, Artem was a deity that fell in and out of favour, so it's entirely possible that Pithom was moved as the deity fell in and out of favour. This means that dating Pithom becomes quite complex, as there is more than one location that could be referred to as Pithom in the archaeological record. At least that's true at the time that this video goes out. The search for Pithom does in fact continue, so if you're watching this video even in a year from the time it's broadcast, please do remember to do your own research. The other name, Pi Ramses, or simply Ramses, means the home of Ramses. No doubt you have heard of a pharaoh called Ramses. You've probably heard of the pharaoh the Great, Ramses the Great, which was Ramses II. As the name suggests, Pi Ramses was built by a pharaoh named Ramses sometime during 1279 to 1213. Remember that the numbers count down when you are using numbers in BCE, so before Common Era. This handily means that the text of Exodus can't have been written much before, or even before 1279, as the city of Pi-Ramses hadn't even begun to being built. This doesn't mean that the stories in Exodus can't be older than that and referring to something that happened before this date, but it does mean that the text itself can't have been written before 1279. For most people, this isn't really a problem. Exodus is an example of mythos, a story that is true at its heart with a lot of added extras, and we talked a lot about that when we talked about Genesis. But it does cause some problems when we come to think of what is known as the traditional dating of the Bible. Much of these dates that people come to think of came from Bishop Ussher in the 17th century. While it may seem silly to us now, the chronology of the world by Bishop Ussher represents quite a lot of high-quality scholarly work based on the information that was available to Bishop Ussher at the time. So intent was he on being accurate that he placed the starting date of the world to October the 23rd, 4004 BCE. He was wrong, of course. But if you've ever wondered where the young Earth creationists get their date of the world being 6,000 years old, this is where they got it. Ussher set out to build a timeline based on everything he knew, like the lives of Pharaoh from Matthew and other information that could be verified. And when it couldn't be verified, he relied on the information of the Bible's dates for the rest. So when it said so-and-so reigned for so many years and then went to see his ancestors, Bishop Ussher would take those numbers to be completely true. He wasn't the first to try this feat. Others, like Bede, Kepler, and even Sir Isaac Newton had a go, getting roughly similar dates. So he wasn't just going out on a limb. He was dealing with scientists and historians, Bede being a great historian, Sir Isaac Newton being a scientist. So he was working with information that at the time was thought to be as accurate as possible. And so it is Ussher's chronology, out of all of those that gave it a go, that has actually ended up being the one that holds sway. So back to our city of Pi-Ramses. The normal dating of Exodus in a chronology like Ussher's sets the date to around 491 BCE, it being Bishop Ussher. He didn't like the word around, so he says it's 491 BCE. It should now be easy to show that the books of Exodus can't have been written at 491 BCE because Ramses II, or even the city of Ramses, that hadn't been built yet, and wouldn't build his city for another 300 years. This leads us then to an interesting impasse that we're going to come to in a few times when we come to dating these early books of the Old Testament. Problem 1. If Exodus had happened in 1491, then it means that the writers of the book of Exodus can't have been Moses, as he died before the Israelites entered into the Promised Land, which according to the books of Exodus itself, they would have done long before the time of Ramses the Great, and therefore long before the time of Pi-Ramses. Problem 2. If Exodus happened in the reign of Ramses the Great, then the internal dating of the Bible, at least as stated in Kings, which says that there's 480 years after the arrival of the children of Israel into the Promised Land, leads to the 4th year of King Solomon's reign. You need to do some really fancy maths with what happened in the time of Joshua and Judges to kind of get that 480 years to fit. So you kind of get that, there's a tension there. If your head is spinning from all these numbers, don't worry about it. As I said in the last video, we have very little to anchor these things to. If it was perhaps a story of a judge, then maybe we could sit lightly to the numbers. However, a lot of importance is placed on Exodus, and particularly on the saving of the people by Yahweh. So it needs to somehow have a historical linking. because we see not just in the book of Exodus, but also in the Psalms and in the songs. For example, the Song of Miriam that we find in Exodus seems to be a much older text or a much older song than the text around it. So it's clearly recalling something that was important to the people. So we need to find whether or not this is something that we can link to some sort of historical event. It's a lot of pressure for a little video. So when we go and have a look at what we already know, we know that numbers in the Bible are often used to describe big numbers. We can simply look at the numbers here and realize that the numbers are massive. The massive times and a massive number of people. And it could seem like a lot of hyperbole. And I would suggest that they are. We see inflated numbers on a lot of historical events, numbers of armies, and that kind of stuff. And often these numbers are used as code, sometimes to impress upon others just how big their armies are. Let's see if we can take one that you may have heard of. So if we were to take the word centurion, it refers to the number 100, cent meaning 100. There's no evidence of these ever being collections of 100 people. So centurions would have been collections of 80, sometimes 60, and in some cases even as low as 40. So centurion never meant 100 as far as we can tell when referencing the army. So already when you're hearing, numbers like, there were so many centurions, that number is already being automatically inflated by the use of the word cent. So if the numbers aren't trustworthy, can we even trust the event itself? Can we trust that a large number of people left Egypt in a hurry? Now, I would say that 600,000 people is a lot, and it sounds like a number designed to show just how big it was. So we can probably sit lightly to 600,000 people, but we are still looking for a lot of people leaving Egypt. We also need to remember that Exodus is written by the victors, however you define victors here. So it's written by the Israelites to paint themselves in a better light. Either as those that were oppressed and therefore had to leave Egypt for their own good, to kind of mythologize and create a better image. You don't want to start your new reign and a new land without this kind of sort of self-aggrandizement. So is there an event that can line up here? Interestingly, there is a historical event that could match some of these details. And it happened in 1550 BCE. There was a people called the Hyksos. They were a Semitic people who invaded Egypt sometime between 1650 and 1515. So they ruled for about 100 years. And they didn't rule all of Egypt, just the lower part of Egypt from the city of Avaris. After about 100 years, these people were overthrown and they were chased out of Egypt. And I don't just mean that they were, allowed to leave Egypt running away. They were chased through Israel by military campaign after military campaign to utterly put down the Hyksos. Egypt was unimpressed by the fact that they had been invaded by the Hyksos. And in fact, the images that we have on Israel paint the Hyksos as being bloodthirsty, violent rulers. So what we've got then is that these people were chased out of Egypt, and you can kind of see how you wouldn't want to paint yourself as a bloodthirsty ruler. They probably weren't. Remember that history written by the victors often depicted those that lost as being more evil than they actually were. So Exodus then really kind of mirrors this event, and they do manage to get away, at least initially, and Egypt needs to go back and regroup before going out and trying to finish the job, which takes them quite a few number of campaigns before they actually get all of the Hyksos. And if we look at history, by then the Hyksos people have intermarried, and really finding them separate from the local community would be very difficult to do. This is not a new idea. Josephus, a Roman Jewish scholar from the 1st century, was the first one to make the connection that we know of, or at least I know of at the time of this video, between the Hyksos and Exodus. And it's fallen in and out of scholarly favour over the years, because we don't really have enough evidence to say one way or the other. But it is interesting that there is this event that is recorded here in Exodus. They're not similar in every detail, but there's a lot to connect them. It is very possible, therefore, that the Hyksos were the inspiration for the Exodus story. Though, of course, the story didn't happen, as I've said, exactly as we had in Exodus, but gained bits and pieces over time. So we could be looking at here is a story that's written much later about this event. So it's written at the time where people know about Egypt. They've had to trade with Egypt, so they're writing about these grand cities that have been there a while by the time Exodus is written. So it kind of glosses it, modernizes the time, and localizes this event in a time that people are familiar with. Again, this is not unusual to Israel. It was done with a lot of stories that we've seen in Babylon and in Canaan, that they would update place names based on where they knew it now. And you can even see it in our news today. We hear terms like modern day Syria, kind of replacing the place that was originally there with the fact that it's now in Syria. So-and-so is now in modern-day Palestine. So-and-so is now in northern Iraq. So it's very much a similar kind of idea to what we're doing now. But, of course, we have the internet, so we can fact-check these things, we can chase them down. Less so for the people writing these books in around 1200 BCE. So we then have to go and look at where that puts us as theologians, because Exodus was such an important and seminal part in the formation of Israel, and Israel as an identity, and that formation really informs what it is to be a Christian. We really see a lot of these ideas of being saved, of being rescued by the hand of Yahweh, being mimicked and repeated throughout the Old Testament and on into the New. So we can't just leave it here. Just because there is uncertainty in the biblical account, it doesn't remove the force of the narrative. It says repeatedly that Yahweh came and saved the Israelites, and it did so in a way that remained in the public imagination. If we can find this historical event, maybe based on the Hyksos, we can see that these people escaping from the Egyptians, who were set out to kill them, would have found their arrival in Israel to be miraculous. It's a story that people time and time again find resonating with where they are, not just in the modern world, but throughout history. The metaphors that we find in there, both intentional and unintentional, because stories are collections of metaphors, really make a difference because they're speaking about living people. When you look at the stories of Exodus, I mean, really look, not just the story that you remember, but go and have a look at it in the Bible. It's messy. It talks about everybody making mistakes. It talks about people making obvious mistakes to us who are, reading the story, but may not have been obvious from them. And if we put ourselves in their shoes, we can go, oh yeah, if I'd been there, I might have made that same mistake as well. So these stories are not just stories unconnected. They're about real people that are living their lives with Yahweh. It says that Moses himself is a flawed human. We look at Miriam, Moses' wife, and the way she bursts forth into song, perhaps the most ancient song in the Bible. I mean, it's definitely older than the text around it, and the song is so full of joy. Look what Yahweh has done for my people. Look at how I celebrate, with all the women dancing, that we are now safe, that we have escaped the brutal Egyptians. And you can see how that song would have resonated with the people that had just escaped and being persecuted by Egypt for their rule of Egypt. So you can really see how this really kind of resonates with real people. It's a text that speaks of what it is to live with Yahweh. I think it is those things that make this story important. The fact that those things are still going on, that people are still living and making these mistakes, that God, from my perspective, is still stepping in and still saving people, and that people still want to respond by joyously leaping forth in song. Perhaps not the song of Miriam, because I don't think it really works in English, but with our own song, with our own celebration of what God has done for us. So while there might be uncertainty, the book itself still stands and still has a lot of powerful things to say to us. So next, so thank you very much for joining us. I hope that you have enjoyed this study. I hope that you've had a good time this afternoon, and I hope that you will be back to join with us as we talk about the next book, and we talk about the conquest of Joshua going through Israel. There's a really interesting book with a lot of difficulties in kind of dating it, even though it really should be one of the easiest. So we've got to look at Joshua and what that means and what place he plays in this whole narrative. If you have enjoyed these videos, please do remember to like and subscribe to this Twitch channel. If you're watching over on YouTube, please do like and subscribe to the channel. The videos, of course, go out live every Tuesday at 1:30, and please do tune in for the next one. We will hopefully be live on Thursday morning at 10:30 for our Welsh morning prayer, and on Sunday at 10 it won't be live, it will be recorded, because our churches are beginning to return for in-person worship, but these videos are going to continue for as long as I can manage it. So the video on Sunday will be recorded, but it will still go out at 10, I hope. Fingers crossed, I've not done it before. So hopefully you will be able to tune in for that, but we'll be back live Tuesday at 1:30 to look at the book of Joshua. If you are enjoying these videos and want to keep in touch, we are a community of people. We don't just exist in our own locality, but we have got viewers across the world. And if you want to be part of our community, sign up to our Facebook, sign up to our Twitter, get in touch. Start talking to us, help us to get to know you a little better. You can even sign up to our newsletter, and if you really want to help us out wherever you are in the world, we exist entirely on donations. We don't get any money from the government, we don't get any money, there is no lord or lady supporting this. All of the equipment that we've used to do this, all bought by me because I enjoy doing it. So if you do want to support us, please do consider dropping us some money over on PayPal, or if you do want to support us on a kind of ongoing basis, please do have a look at our gift aid down here on this side. This side. I will get used to the fact that it's mirrored on this side. And remember that whatever you're doing, that you look after ourselves. Like I said, we're back in church on Sunday at 11. We will be in St. Thomas's Church, to which everybody is welcome. It will be on PowerPoint. There will be social distancing rules in place. We will be asking people to wear masks. There's a whole bunch of stuff which we will go through when you come to the service. So please do come only if you are feeling well. Do not come if you've got any symptoms of COVID-19, or even if you just think you've got a cold. Please don't come. The video will be here. Everybody is welcome. We will find place for you socially distance, whatever happens, I hope. So whatever you're doing, however you're looking after yourself this week, please remember to stay safe. wear a mask, wash your hands, use antibacterial, stay 6 foot away from somebody. Please stay home as much as you conceivably can. And whatever you're doing, look after yourself and go with God. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.